Hello, I'm Teresa Eyring, Executive Director and CEO of TCG, and I use she, hers pronouns. I'm sitting at my dining table wearing a snazzy leopard print top, blue rimmed glasses, and with longish brown hair, getting unrulier as the day goes on. I am a white cisgendered woman sitting in front of our fall forum backdrop with a plant and just in thriving theater ecology, the theme of this conference and our closing plenary. And I'm currently zooming in from the unceded lands of the Lenape and the Wappinger peoples.
Hello, everyone, and I'm Adrian Badu, Deputy Director and COO of TCG, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm currently zooming in from the land of the Lenape peoples. To provide a visual description, I am Indian descent, I have black hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a navy blue button down with little sailboats on it. Welcome to the closing plenary of TCG's 2020 Fall Forum, A Just and Thriving Theater Ecology. In a minute, we're going to interrogate that title, which comes from TCG's new mission. But first, I want to thank Sonia, Nina, Lauren, and Eric for that last session on accountability. If you'd like to share a word or a phrase or question that's still resonating with you, please do so in the chat. And in the spirit of joy and community, I want to share something from my home with you. It's text from A Sailor's Guide to Life, and it reads, "Stay anchored, look for new horizons, ask questions when you don't know the ropes, let your dreams set sail, no matter the weather, family is your safe harbor, and let your heart be your compass." So I'm sharing this sailor's wisdom with you all as we sail into our final plenary today. Now it's time to move into our final plenary where we'll ask, what do you mean by just and thriving, with a focus on what it means for our theater ecology to be just? I'm going to read now from the opening letter of our new strategic plan. And it reads, in 2021, TCG will celebrate the 60th anniversary of our founding. And this plan was forged in the fires of a global pandemic and an uprising against white supremacy. It has felt as if TCG is being refounded, not only by our staff and board, but collectively by a feel that cannot and will not go back to the way things were. As we interrogated what our vision of a better world for theater and a better world because of theater means, we fortified and clarified TCG's mission to lead for a just and thriving theater ecology. By lead for, we mean communal leadership that models listening, accountability, and action. By just and thriving, we envision a movement that has the investments, commitments, and participant it needs to abundantly serve multifaceted communities and advance equity and justice. And by theater ecology, we mean you, whether you be a student, an educator, an artist, an administrator, a technician, a trustee, or all of the above. As those working for climate justice have noted, to change everything, we need everyone.
Thank you for that, Adrian. I would like to tell you that I'm very excited to introduce Rihanna Yazzie, the founder and artistic director of New Native Theater.
Hi there. I think that's my cue to talk, right?
Yes. Hi, Rihanna.
Hi, everybody. It feels so unexpected to be able to talk to so many of my colleagues, and I am honored to be able to lead this ending session for the Fall Forum for TCG. I'd like to introduce myself in the traditional way that I've been taught. I'm a Navajo artist, and I begin with saying Yat E, Rihanna Yazi Yinishye, Dohat Iyith Nishli, Tranazani Bashchin, Nahitli Dashche, Do Trachini Dashanale, Kot Ego Dene Adza Nishle. So I introduced myself and what my 4 clans are, which is the clans that my 4 grandparents come from. We do this in our culture because it's a transparent way of explaining who you are. And it also is a way to see if you're related to somebody. And which I think is the most important thing when we take a look about thinking what is a just and thriving theater ecology. You know, from my perspective, I do a lot of work as a playwright. My work revolves entirely around Indigenous worldview, bringing that to light. And as an artistic director at New Native Theater, everything that we curate is centered around an Indigenous worldview. And if I was going to sort of pare that down to a nutshell, it would be that Indigenous worldview values relationships, and everything is relationship oriented. In contrast to what we may be familiar with the European white Cartesian Western Judeo-Christian mindset, which is often object oriented. And I think that right now in the world, we're starting, the non-native people of this world are starting to realize that relationships to each other, relationships to our land, to our water, to our animals, to our resources, is the way that we're going to continue and survive. I think there's probably some bio of me somewhere, so you are free to look that up. But I also want to acknowledge that I am speaking to you from the traditional homelands of the Dakota Oyate, and of course, I encourage everyone here to acknowledge the traditional homelands of which American Indian peoples you are on. Please don't feel you have to put that in the chat. And also at New Native Theater, when we do land acknowledgements, we like to ask questions, and I think and that's what we're going to do here today. So these questions were created by myself and Dakota visual artist Angela Two Stars, and we do this as our land acknowledgement at New Native Theater, which is located in the Twin Cities, for those of you who are unfamiliar with where the Dakota Oyanke land is. First question is, what is your intent on being in this land and in this community? How will you use the new resources, including ideas that you gain from being here? How will you replace the things that you take from here? And that includes ideas. And how will you carry the knowledge of the Native people present, past, and future into the work you do? And then finally, how will you increase Indigenous power? All right. So, moving into this last session, a just and thriving theater ecology. I think there were many ways that we could go about answering this. We could do a deep interrogation of what is the meaning of just, what is the meaning of thriving. I hear you had a very robust conversation as to what the meaning of community was yesterday. But that's not really where I'm looking to go. I would like to ask powerful questions, and I would like to invite us over this next hour or so to really look at this subject of just and thriving through the lens that we as people, as community members, and as theater makers, we have so much of the knowledge that we need that's already here inside of us. And powerful questions can evoke those answers, can empower us to think in new ways. So this is a process that I learned from living here in Minnesota from an elder named Lemoyne Lapointe, who is Changu Lakota. And I had learned from him because I had New Native Theater myself for many years, had worked in doing crisis intervention training. And crisis intervention training is about recognizing when somebody is in a mental health crisis, and whether that's in a private setting or if it's in a public setting, and you learn the steps to de-escalate that situation so that you can help that person. And again, we learn these sorts of things because we put relationship as our guiding practice. And so the health and well-being of the people around us, whether they're family members, friends, or community members at large, or members of our different tribal communities, it's important to know that and to make sure that the people in your community are healthy, and how can you contribute to that? And so as theater makers, this question, how are we going to contribute to a just and thriving theater ecology? So I've got quite a few questions. We're going to break out into a few groups, and Karina is here to help me with this. And so as we answer questions, I'm going to give you an example of one. I want you to really think about actionable ways you can answer these things. Things to avoid is, for instance, asking a question. The answer to avoid is, I will listen better, or I will open my heart. We want to go past these sort of like meta theoretical things that you could do into actual action. And that goes from, and I see that as going from being an ally to being an accomplice in the dismantling of white supremacy in the American theater. So if you are down to be accomplices, let's do this. So we're gonna have two different rounds. We're going to break up into 6 groups. And so the first example of question, as we start to think about just and thriving, this powerful question is, in the days to come, when we have a just and thriving theater ecology, what were the stories or plays that were told that ended white supremacy? So these are the kinds of questions you're going to have. And I think that Karina is sharing with you a Google Doc now. And there's 6 questions on there, and we're going to be broken up into 6 groups. And so what I would like is for each group to bring your collective knowledge together to answer these questions, to answer these powerful questions in powerful ways. And then we're going to come back and we're going to hear report outs of what you learned from being in the group and hearing the collective wisdom that of your group. Let's see. Karina, do you want to jump in and talk about the groups, or is that?
I do. And I just want to say how wonderful and grateful I am to you, Rihanna, for being here with us. One of the most amazing experiences in my theater life was at New Native Theater. So just really honored. I've just put some things here in the chat. The words will make sense to you, the numbers will not. And I'm here to explain what those numbers mean. So in order to give you time to be able to really answer these questions for yourself, we have you in smaller groups, and that means there's more of the groups. You'll see here 6 questions, and make sure you scroll down in your chat to see them. And then you'll see numbers next to them. When we go into breakouts, what you will note is your breakout room will have a number. So just remember that number. And then if your number is 14, you would be talking with your group about what were the societal changing discoveries theater artists made when white supremacy ended its reign in the American theater. And what a conversation you'll have. Or for example, if you had number 22, if you were in breakout room 22, you will answer, who became suddenly visible when a just and thriving theater ecology took place? So that's how it works. Make sure that you track your breakout room number when it appears on your screen so that you know which question you will be discussing with your group. And I know that we're going to take care of each other in this slightly complex move into breakouts. You know we're going to be able to do it. So with that, I'm going to ask Josh to bring us into breakouts. This should remain in your chat even when you go. And we'll have 15 minutes in breakouts before we come back to report out. Josh, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Yes, give me 1 second. Got 15 minutes. All right, everyone should be automatically moved over, so please stay tuned.
All right. I think we're all still coming back. All right. How did that go? Oh, great. I'm hearing that we had some good conversations. All right. Can we start with the first group that had the first question, and please unmute yourself, whoever's reporting back from that first group, and I'll just read the question. In the days to come, when we have a just and thriving theater ecology, what were the stories / plays that were told or done that ended white supremacy? Okay, group number 1, let's hear your answer.
And Rihanna, just noting that because of the number of wonderful people that are here, I think actually 4 groups had that question.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. Would somebody like to report back from there? From one of the groups?
I can report back if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm Kate from room number 1. And please, room number 1 fellow members, add what I leave out. We imagine plays that are about breaking down white supremacy, and also plays that imagine a world where white supremacy never existed. The world that we would like to see, and also plays that confront the world we're in now. Plays that imagine that colonization never happened. And also plays that show the dominant white culture that centering others does not mean you are marginalized.
Awesome, thank you so much. Just in the thinking about time, let's go to the group number 2. I think there was probably more than one group number 2. Would somebody like to report back from group number 2? And that question was, what were the societal changing discoveries theater artists made when white supremacy ended its reign in the American theater?
Yeah, I can speak to that. My name is Christian. I'm based here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we had a really, really great dialogue about this. We talked about first, just thinking about societal changing discoveries on the other side of white supremacy, that the audience that theater artists would perform to would not more often be mostly white people. And it would be like for me, for example, I would love to be on stage and see an audience that looks like me and that can identify with the stories that I want to tell. We also talked about how children on the other side of white supremacy can understand the spaces that they take up. And we talked a lot about censorship and how right now censoring plays and censoring certain language under white supremacy helps white people feel more comfortable in the spaces that they take up. And on the other side of that, we can just get rid of that and everyone can just feel comfortable. And like if the space is exclusively, you know, mostly Black people or Latinx people, then the language that is occurring in there doesn't, we're not trying to make white people feel comfortable, if that makes sense. We talked about understanding the way privilege shows up for board members, for example. And dismantling white supremacy means creating a bridge between what artists believe and what board members believe to help create a city or a community that is more robust for everyone. Let's see, let's keep going here. People seeing themselves on the stage in more ways. No more Tony Awards, but more regional awards that have just as much merit as a Tony Award. And it's finally, I'll just end it with this, that a starving artist doesn't exist, but they all have a home, and specifically an artistic home.
Lovely, thank you. And I was in that group, so I'll also add that the next, when when white supremacy ends its reign in the American theater, the president will be elected by the play that they write. All right, let's go to number 3. That question was, what were the meaningful life events that became common practice when the American theater removed white supremacy from its pedagogy? Is somebody from a group 3 like to report?
Yes, hi. So we had, at first, I just put something in the chat also. We had some pauses trying to decide what meaningful life events was, how to define that and get into the question about common practice in the theater. So in the end, we kind of gave some popcorn ideas, things that should be addressed or discussed, or and the first comment was more land acknowledgements will be happening in different ways. Questions about how we fund our work and what we fund. That there might be more children in the workplace, that there could be a different family work-life balance depending on who all is involved. The stage management will be looking at different rehearsal practices so that it won't be run by equity or by other stringent methods. First person, there might be things that are about stories about the first person in a family to do something, the first person in a family to go to college, or the first person in a family to accomplish something. And centering relationships, as was discussed earlier today, as opposed to profit in what we choose to do, and how authentic connections to the community was mentioned earlier also, and finding real partnerships between your theater and people in your larger non-theater community. And a really great one too, presenting failures and lessons, stories that highlight those along with accomplishments instead of just all negative stories. Other people can chime in. Those were quick bullet points.
Great, thank you. I'd like to thank you. That's really great. I also want to encourage the. Well, I'll say it when we get to our next round. But these are really great answers. Let's go on to question 4, which is, who became suddenly visible when a just and thriving theater ecology took place? Could I hear from group number 4?
I can speak up for our discussion group.
Okay.
So some of the specific communities that we said would become visible include immigrant communities, displaced people, speaking of like gentrification and being pushed out of their neighborhoods, a member of our group is putting together a curriculum on non-white and non-European classics. So communities that would be represented within that description, disabled people, and we said that ourselves would become more visible, and like our intersectional natures as people would be embraced and appreciated in a different way, and that we could find different joy in what we do. The conversation also sparked two interesting questions. One was when we were talking about disabled communities, we discussed, well, how do those people want to be referred, which led to the larger question of or not, I guess, larger observation of, once these communities are visible, like how do we speak to them, refer to them, and engage with them in ways that are respectful and meaningful and that they want. So that was interesting. Another question that came up was around the use of the word suddenly, and that doesn't necessarily imply the like ongoing work involved, though I get that it was a hypothetical. And we also talked about how being visible is, I guess, kind of it can be viewed as a confining word, and that it's more about being seen and celebrated and acknowledged, and things that like exist beyond just like visibility alone, and like what theaters can do to help to foster that.
Great, thank you so much. All right, let's go to the fifth question. What societal changes came as a result of theater practitioners nourishing their families and relationships, and when the theater ecology changed to become just and thriving? That was a little wordy. I guess I could have worked on it more, but what societal changes came as a result of theater practitioners nourishing their families and relationships? Do we have somebody from a group 5 who'd like to talk about that?
I'd be happy to talk about it from group 11, Diane, you, she, her, hers. We had a great group, great conversation, could have gone on for another 15 minutes. But what we thought would be the big societal change is that the theater industry would be the microcosm of society, the model, the exemplar for how to do this, how to dismantle systemic racism, how to create anti-racist, multicultural organizations that are truly inclusive, diverse, and welcoming, that embrace people, that allow people to feel they belong, that gives them something to see, that makes them see themselves, to make them feel that this is what a community ought to be like. And the way in which we have dismantled these systemic racist policies and procedures would also be an exemplar for how society can do this, because we will have done it in a firm, determined, collaborative way that could be, as we say, a model for the country. And the result would be more empathy, more kindness, less harm, more equality, all sorts of wonderful good things.
Oh, I love the way you and your group think. That's so wonderful. That's very inspiring to hear. I think so many of us in theater do believe that we are a microcosm, especially those of us who are deeply connected to specific communities. We're always looked at as a model for many situations. All right. I think I understand these numbers now. So so let's go to the last question. So that would be the 6th question, but group 6, 12, and 18. Who came back to your theaters after you healed specific harms in order to become just and thriving? Would somebody from that last question, who tackled that last question, like to talk?
I can do it. This is Chris with Group 12.
All right.
We had a really good conversation. It's a mixture of trustees and artists and some advocacy groups. So from the notes, everyone who felt excluded from what's on stage on boards in administrations of theaters, children, students, people of color who never felt theater wasn't for them, including people who felt theater was never for them. Sorry, just repeat that. Hopefully feel that theater was now a part of their lives. Deepen my self-reflection into anti-racism for allowing in this new future a much greater focus on community building. Work reflects those efforts, serves all communities. Would like people who do not present the way I present, not so white, not so middle class, not so upper Northwest, Washington, DC, sorry, specific, hearing the stories that the community wants to hear, just not people who look like my stories. A really big commitment to authentic community engagement strategies, new and innovative ways to incorporate just the talk back, because COVID in a sense renewal in community devised work. And lastly, advocacy. Resources are more equitably distributed for more fair access.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. There's some other comments in the chat. I'm having a little tough time keeping up with that, so please feel free as individuals to take a look there. Yeah, wow. These are some really great answers. So we're going to break out in one more breakout with 6 more questions, and as we answer these 6 questions, as you tackle them, I would like to challenge you to really be in the present time of when the question is asked. So for instance, if the question says that white supremacy has been dismantled, I want you to put yourself in that place. In fact, I'm just going to do a short somatic exercise with everyone right now. So if you're sitting in a chair and if you can put your feet on the ground, just feel your feet on the ground. No judgment, not trying to change anything, but you just feel your feet on the ground. You can wiggle your toes if you like. And you can just scan your body and putting no judgment on that scan, and try not to change anything you find in that scan, but you're just noticing how your body is right now. So white supremacy has been dismantled. How does your body feel when I say that statement? Where in your body do you feel comfort, release, or tightening? Just want you to notice it. It's not a test for what's the best answer and what's not a good answer, but it's a way to put you in present time, to be in your body. And I'd like you to answer this next set of questions from that place. So the wonderful thing that I love about theater is for 2 hours, you can put your audience in a completely different world. And at New Native Theater, many times we produce plays that are in a different reality from which our Native community lives in, because there's so many disparities and deficits that we have come to as Native people due to a lot of things. And so for those 2 hours, we actually changed the nervous system of our community when we are producing a play that perhaps has a premise of white supremacy has been dismantled. All of the buffalo have been returned, and all of the treaties have been honored. So that makes your body feel differently. And so for the 2 hours that folks are watching your play, or the 3 hours, or however long your plays are, or 10 minutes, you have such power to change the nervous system. And so let's take a look at this next set of questions. Karina, would you mind putting them in there, or is it Adrian? Put these questions into the chat. And I'll go ahead. Oh, good. All right. So we're going to break into our into a group again for 15 minutes, and I'd like you to answer these questions as if these things have happened. And I really want you to imagine a different set of circumstances. Imagine you have that things have changed in this way, and what are the powerful observations that have come from the results of these changes. And try not to get hung up on the semantics of some of the wording. It is, some of it's a little wordy, but try not to get hung up on it. Go with the overall sort of meaning of what you're taking away from this. All right, let's go ahead and break into our different groups. Okay, I think we're all back. Great. All right. All right. So let's listen to some of the wisdom that you got from breaking out in groups and answering these questions. So is there somebody from the first question group that would like to talk? And that question was, how did consent and agency empower the change to a just and thriving ecology as the dominant experience in the American theater? Somebody from groups 1, 7, 13, or 19 like to unmute themselves?
I can. I was in group 1, and we spent a lot of time just reflecting on some resonances from this morning's session as well about accountability, and this idea that without consent, there can be no accountability, and what that means for kind of traditional structures as we see them now with, like, artistic directors and audience members, the consent required for all of us to imagine the change that we are hoping, this dismantling of white supremacy, of creating a more just and thriving American theater ecology, the need that comes from everyone consenting to that work. And also this just idea of, like, what does that do to a rehearsal room? Or instead of coming in and saying, okay, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do, this is my vision, saying, like, will you come with me on this journey? And how that changes and leaves space for people to come in and be themselves and create, and to hear all the voices in the room.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I love that you are talking about that in such specific terms as well. Wonderful. I believe that there are some folks who are dropping their answers into the chat, so feel free to take a look at that. As I watch the clock and I watch the river of time melt here before our session is over, I'm going to go ahead and read the second question. In what ways was power redefined and redistributed when a just and thriving theater ecology happened? Does anybody who talked about that second question in groups 2, 18, 2, 4, I'm losing it. 2, 8, 14, or 20 want to unmute and talk about that? Anybody from group?
Okay, I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Jennifer. And my group, I took just a few broad strokes notes from our group, and we talked about removing competition and commercial hierarchies so that we are moving toward an understanding that we benefit from one another's work, whether it's across the field, across the country, no matter the size or scale of the work, that there is an ecology to it and that we are benefiting from one another's practice. We talked about community curation. There was an example of, I think, a museum in Seattle that has a project of community curation where the community contributes to the curation of the work. There was discussion about participatory grant making and budgeting, again, so engaging community-based approaches to making decisions about how commerce or the money is spent and who benefits. Removing the power of commerce is the final button to the conversation.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Those are some really fantastic ideas. You know, hearing how we benefit from each other's work. Honestly, I don't think I've ever heard that before in a theater conversation, in an American theater conversation, that work being done here or here, that we are benefiting from it. I think that's a really beautiful, innovative idea, and yet it's kind of like isn't that the basis of what we do anyway? I mean, it's almost sort of like bringing forth the hegemony that's been hidden for why we've become theater makers. All right. Question 3. Who in your city, artist community, and on your staff suddenly became visible and heard when leadership was shared at your theater in a just and thriving ecology? I almost want to hear like specific names in this answer. Does anybody from groups 3, 9, 15, or 21 want to talk about their report back from their group?
We don't know their names specifically because they've been so erased. So the exciting moment of the future is being able to hear the people who know the right answers in the right time. We don't know who their names are or who they are because they're generally not even inside the room. That's what we're excited about, the people who aren't there yet.
Oh, I love that, Claudia. Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay, we're going to go to the next question, which is, what unhealthy thought patterns, desires, and lived experiences disappeared when you embraced collective liberation? Does anybody who talked about this question from groups 4, 10, 16, or 22 like to answer or report back? Oh, this one's maybe hitting a nerve. Does anybody from any of those groups want to give 1 or 2 answers or thoughts from that?
Sure, I'll jump in. I didn't take robust notes, so we'll see how this goes. Some of the things we talked about were toxic urgency, the idea of lack of action due to kind of paralysis that comes from being a part of a nonprofit or a predominantly white institution. Also, goodness, trying to remember what we talked about. We had a really lovely, robust discussion about what, how we will end up being able to move forward the work while also doing our own learning, kind of that balance between the need for action and the need to fight against toxic urgency and white urgency. So that was a lot of our discussion. If someone else wants to jump in, feel free.
Thank you so much for that. And you must be on the West Coast with that beautiful sun. Yes, unhealthy urgency. Oh my God, yeah, that's a big one. Definitely one of the tenets of white supremacy, urgency. All right, moving on to the last two questions. This might be a favorite of mine. How did the restoration of land, honoring treaties and attending to missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people contribute to your theater becoming a just and thriving organization? Is there anybody from groups 5, 11, or 17 that would like to talk about their conversations around this question?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Kiara. When we restored the land, we relinquished our buildings. We found that we had new accountability partners, and we were accountable to the stewards of the land, which led to buildings that were community centers in the literal sense of the word, were co-constructed with the land and with the best interests of the land and with the communities. And when we prioritized the safe return of Indigenous women and the end to the murders of Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people, we in turn eradicated patriarchy and hate and harm, which revealed pockets of the communities, of other invisible communities, including the murders of trans women of color. And when all of that was eradicated, they led the way, and they led our organizations, which is how we arrived at the just ecology to begin with.
Oh man, that's a great answer. I love that. I love how you really followed the prompt and put yourself in that moment and imagined all of the steps that it took to get there and where you're going. And you know, perhaps this is my bias speaking, but yeah, I do think that when you put women and trans people in power, you are going to get community and you're going to get peace. So that's just me thinking. All right, thank you so much for that. And the last question is, what members of your community are honored in your space, and through what practices are they celebrated and revered in a just and thriving theater ecology? Would anybody from those groups like to speak to that?
I'll jump in. Hi all, I'm Anne, and coming to you from Laramie, Wyoming, home of the Cheyenne and Arapaho. And you know, we had a really wonderful group mixed of both urban and rural and different communities and representation, different ages. And so I think that brought some really interesting conversation to the forefront in terms of this question: what members of your community are honored in your space, and through what practices are they celebrated and revered, that spoke specifically to each of our individual places. But ultimately, overriding all of this is that all individuals, regardless of background, socioeconomic status, gender identity, race, every individual is honored on a human level rather than as a sort of generalized front. Specifically, I spoke about here in Wyoming that young adults are honored and listened to and respected, which encourages them to stay, to find and make home in the communities where they are, rather than following that capitalistic mandate that tells them they need to go elsewhere, like get out to make it somewhere big. And that in our practices that we have an audience engagement component, both outside of the theater space and in the theater space, that creates community buy-in, and where we see our community members really using the theater as a stepping stone for building, for organizing, for the betterment of society, that we see cultural practices coming in from all areas, from all melting pots, whether we have different, whatever the cultural background, but if we're doing, if the play is a native story, that we have tribal cultural practices. Kansas City did a play by Larissa Fasthorst in which there were ceremonies before and after the production, generating deep respect for the elders, and believing that whatever community is honored, those practices and rituals are part of the performance, and are the conditions under which we do the work. And that LGBTQ are celebrated not just on stage, but at large, and that BIPOC queer communities, Black trans communities, all individuals that are woefully represented in arts, in the arts and in the community have a spotlight as well, and that we can eschew those Western ideas of how you have to act in the theater spaces, so that all communities can show up how they feel comfortable without being judged, and that we can truly cultivate a space for joy.
Oh my God, that's amazing. So basically it's allowing everyone to do theater. Who would have thought? Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. And thank you everybody who really just deeply went into these questions. We do have one more activity that I think is going to be fairly short. But again, I truly believe that powerful questions are a way to get to really be able to hear the wisdom that's already in the group, because I don't think that we are trying to find things outside of us, outside of our own experiences, to try and solve our problems, or try to create new paradigms. There's so much wisdom in the collective experience, and when you ask questions that are powerful, you evoke powerful answers. And we've heard so many beautiful, powerful answers here today. I would really, really love to lead you into our last activity, which is for you to create your own powerful question. So over this last hour and a half, where we've been putting ourselves in the mindset of a just, an equitable theater ecology and thriving theater ecology, what are more ways that we can continue to ask powerful questions from that perspective, when putting ourselves at the goal and working backwards for how did we get there? I would invite you to please put your questions into the chat, and let these be questions that really evoke a sense of activeness. So for all of the playwrights and dramaturgs out there, you know, we are we want action more so than ideology. What are the physical things that that we can do to reach this just and thriving theater ecology? So I'll one thing I've been thinking about, I was in a group that we were talking about the shift of power. I would just sort of put out there, if children and family was the most powerful segment of our society, how does that create a just and thriving theater ecology? So there's an example. All right, and Karina just put into the chat, how will undocumented folks and refugees be welcomed, supported, and celebrated by our theaters when we are just and thriving? Karina, I might need a little help with timekeeping, so if you want to jump in. But I would also actually love to hear folks' answers to this question. We have another question here. What have we as artists and organizations done to acknowledge, reduce, and prevent the harm that we have done through our white supremacist and capitalistic worldviews, policies, and interactions? Another question on the chat is how to heal the unhealthy fears that have been building in our country. How will theater address? Yeah. How will our homeless population be represented and be supported when our theaters are just and thriving? When we, I love all these questions. When we are in a just and thriving theater ecology, how will we train and educate future generations of theater makers? What will understanding look like in a just theater ecology for people who have had a difficult time recognizing the harm they've done? How will accountability look different when our theater is just and thriving? How has the structure and duties of our nonprofit theater boards changed in a just society? As a just and thriving theater community, what practices will we institute to ensure our ecology never returns to a harmful or unsafe place of art making? How did we examine our own internal racism and trauma to get past them so we can share empathy with others? How was our field revolutionized when, so many questions, when economic barriers to becoming and living an artist are eradicated? Yes. In a just and thriving theater ecology, what will we do with all our healthy free time? Love that. All right, wonderful. So
Rihanna, that might be a good one to end on. If it's okay.
So I'm going to hand the mic back over to the TCG staff, but I just wanted to say thank you very much for being a part of this this last session, and I'm very honored that I was asked to lead it. And I really want to thank Karina for helping me get to the space where I felt safe to lead this conversation, and found a way that I felt really strong in how to contribute to this conversation so that all of us as participants could leave in a way that was good, that felt good, that we were better people when we left it than when we started. That's always been my ethic at New Native Theater. And I also want to acknowledge that so much of my learning and knowledge has come from those who've come before me. And I want to acknowledge playwrights and mentors this year, in the last year. Bruce King, who's an Oneida theater maker, passed a year ago, who should be in the canon of American theater for plays. Also Daniel David Moses, who had passed this summer, who's an amazing First Nations theater artist. And of course, I always like to acknowledge the person who got me doing Native theater, William S. Yellow Robe Jr., who also, his plays should be in the canon if we had a Justin Theater equitable ecology. And I want to thank the Twin Cities Theaters of Color Coalition, which is made up of Penumbra Theater, Pangea World Theater, Theater Mu, and Teatro del Pueblo here in the Twin Cities, which we do so much coalition building and asking powerful questions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rihanna, for that beautiful gift of a session. There's so much love in the chat. Keep it coming. I think we're going to hear from Teresa.
Yes, you are going to hear from me. Thank you so much, Corinna, and thank you, Rihanna. That was just so joyful, that session, and I love the inspiration that comes with just asking questions, asking powerful questions and finding the answers to them together. So, you know, over the course of these Fall Forum days together, we've really begun to define what just and thriving theater looks like. And as TCG leans into these questions and pursues just and thriving, we're just very grateful to each of you for your partnership. You've really helped to demonstrate how theater can lead the way. Thank you, Diane Yu. And thank you all for sharing your enthusiasm and your wisdom, and for donating to support TCG, and for bringing so much, again, joy, J-O-Y, to these 3 days. I also want to put a huge shout out and thank you to the entire TCG staff, to our Fall Forum, BIPOC advisory team, and the production team, to our programming council, and of course to TCG's tireless and dedicated board of directors. We're really deeply grateful to our BIPOC colleagues. They've experienced the harm of our theater system for so many decades, and we have to honor their labor and the love that generated 30 pages and over 300 demands for white American theater. Thank you for this blueprint, for this roadmap that can guide us in righting the wrongs and reducing the harm and building a healthier, more equitable, transparent, and respectful and loving environment for all. So one last thing before we wrap up, I want to speak again to the memory of Diane Rodriquez and let you know that the video we showed at the top has been uploaded to Mighty Networks, and it will soon be on our website as well. So if you'd like to take a look at it again, it will be there. I really encourage you to do so. And finally, to close this out with one last grounding, we'll end as we began with a closing meditation from Corinna Schulenberg.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Thank you, Rihanna. All right, friends, please make sure you're comfortable. Turn off your camera if you'd rather not be seen. Get whatever pillows or support your body needs. Find your connection with the ground. And then if it's comfortable for you, close and relax your eyes and breathe. It's hard to believe, but it was only a year ago that at our last Fall Forum, some of us gathered together in person in Lenapehoking, or New York City. And it was there that the brilliant and beloved Maddie Sayet asked us, when we think of the future of our theaters, What kind of ancestors do we want to be? When I ask that question again, please breathe and let it into your body. When we think of the future of our theaters, what kind of ancestors do we want to be? And please keep breathing as I share a poem with you that's connected to Maddie's question and the work that Rihanna's been doing with us. It's from Mary Oliver's poem, October, so we're only a month off. And at the beginning of it, she asks, what does the world mean to you if you can't trust it to go on shining when you're not there? And breathe. Now I'm going to read the end of the poem, and I invite you to walk with Mary Oliver as you keep breathing. Sometimes in the late summer, I won't touch anything, not the flowers, not the blackberries brimming in the thickets. I won't drink from the pond. I won't name the birds or the trees. I won't whisper my own name. One morning, the fox came down the hill, glittering and confident, and didn't see me. And I thought, so this is the world. I'm not in it. It is beautiful. And breathe. And now I invite you to become, for just a moment, that powerful ancestor that you will be, and to imagine your theater or whatever creative community you call home. And I want you to picture it with your future ancestor eyes. Many years from now, glittering and confident, brimming and shining. Who do you see there? What are they doing? What does their joy sound like? How are they holding each other in loving accountability? And breathe. And as you breathe and picture that, I invite you to see how your work mattered, how your struggle mattered, how what you let go of wasn't lost, but transformed into what was needed. How present you are in your absence. This is the world. We are not in it. It is beautiful. And let's take one last breath together in, hold it for a moment, and let go. Let go of that future ancestor we are already becoming. And when you're ready, open your eyes, shake out whatever needs shaking out, and turn on your cameras. And let's go into gallery mode. Let's see each other. Hi. Hey, friends. Thank you.
We're going to hear from one of our theater's greatest ship captains, someone who always led with the heart's compass, the late and deeply missed Diane Rodriquez, our board chair from 2013 to 16. In the fall of 2019, before she passed away from cancer earlier this year, Diane wrote an essay, In the Boardroom Where It Happens, which we published last month in American Theater Magazine. It's a powerful and prescient call to diversity on our boards. Thanks to members of Team Diane and others whose lives were touched by her leadership and love, we're going to hear some of that essay given voice today. Diane, you are missed, you are loved, and we are accountable to the example you set through your leadership and through your daily acts of kindness, of creativity, and of love. We want to thank all of the contributors to this video and to Erica Lauren Ortiz, who produced it, and Erica Kramer, who edited.
For years, in the political jargon
of Mexican-American activist baby boomers,
better known as Chicanos,
I and my colleagues have used the word
decolonize to define both our goal
and the obstacles in the way
of achieving it. I saw firsthand that the nonprofit model is built on the patronage of the wealthy.
While public-facing artistic programs at many institutions are rightly under scrutiny for lack of equity and diversity,
there must be a similar sense of social responsibility and accountability for the boards of these same institutions.
One must wonder why both the philanthropic and nonprofit arts and culture sector can withhold millions of dollars of taxes from the overall societal greater good,
without delivering services to all communities, not just those of privilege.
Changing the makeup of a board to create an equitable and socially responsible cohesion is a monumental change, not merely a cosmetic effort.
It is also an urgent mandate. Nonprofit theaters have a responsibility under the law to adhere to the greater good principle.
Why not create a vision of philanthropy that is not rewarded with 1% elitism, that keeps the elite in their own separate area, but instead is in service of a democratic approach?
In the words of scholar Diane Ragsdale, democratic culture is about cultural equity.
It suggests that there is no preordained artist hierarchy that automatically places work made by professionals above work made by amateurs. Works that are improvised, works performed in a gorgeous facility overlooking a body of water, over works performed in the community center, the prison, the school, or on the streets.
what is important is the dismantling of the artistic hierarchy that has plagued our field for decades,
and which exalts the works of dead and living white men over works by people of color.
We all have the need and the right to tell our own stories.
In exchange for that right, we agree to hear the stories of others.
This value should be shared in every artistic medium.
Our boards need to wrap themselves around this concept.
I definitely had an insatiable appetite to defy the status quo, but I was not the leader of the theater, and those words were not in my job description.
If we want our theaters to remain vital to our communities, we have to redefine philanthropy in terms of a larger mission of cultural equity.
We must recruit and keep board members who understand this value as one that is urgent for the well-being not only of our art form, but of our country.
I continue
to have hope.
I continue
to have hope. With more artistic leadership of color and more women in positions to greenlight projects, we are undoubtedly entering a new phase for the American theater.
The potential for a new democratic culture that erases hierarchy and privilege could be monumental, a game changer.
Theaters across the country may depend on the wealthy to keep our doors open, but art is not charity. People of color are not charity.
We are joined in a common cause.
Let's bring down the walls between wealthy patrons and the rest of us.
Between the so-called gatekeepers and the audience.
Together, we can build and sustain cultural centers
that welcome us all.
Thank you.